but she also has a great deal of research just in her time with public governments. But we always try to have somebody from that private sector side as well, and that's what Dana is here doing tonight, because the relationship between the ability of us to sustain ourselves as a state and that private sector and its relationship to government, how government responds to regulation and taxation and the reforms they have on the books is very much a direct relationship, and it's something that if we care about the future of our state, we need to do a better job understanding as taxpayers. So give it up for Dana Alex. We're glad you're here. And lastly, certainly not least, is one of my favorite people in Ohio. This gentleman has a very long and impressive resume. He served in the Department of Homeland Security under Secretaries Chertoff. He served under Governor Bill Owens in Colorado. He was named one of Colorado's 40 under 40, the age of 40, top 40 professionals under 40 in the state of, or the city of Denver. This man has a very long resume. My favorite, perhaps, is that he's a graduate of the University of Dayton Law School. Go Flyers. But this is also the president of the premier academic think tank, free market think tank, I should say, in Ohio, the Buckeye Institute. Give it up for Matt Mayer. We have one microphone here tonight, so if it's okay, what I'm going to do is start with you, Melanie, for an opening statement, and then we'll go to Matt and Dana. We'll just go right down the road. If you want to sit there, you want to come up here? No, it doesn't make sense. Here. We got to do that on my own.
It's a privilege to be here tonight, and my guess is that each person here fits into one of three categories. You either already know how you're going to vote on Senate Bill 5 and you're in favor, you already know how you're going to vote and you're not in favor in terms of issue 2.
Sorry. She's got to repeat all this. All right, I feel like I'm at Walmart, but we have a Philip Bennett with a blue Ford truck EUF 7062 with their lights on. If Philip's in the audience, get back quick, sir. I'm sorry. Go ahead. I didn't want your battery to run out. Go ahead.
Not a problem. You're either here tonight and you already know you support issue 2, or you're here tonight and you already know you don't support issue 2. Or you've come tonight because you want additional information, you want to be able to make an informed choice. My concern, because we have been addressing the parameters of Senate Bill 5 over the last several months as an organization. Tonight you should have available to you a handout that's 25 frequently asked questions on the measure. As a part of that handout, I drafted the answers to the questions based on language from the bill, and I cite the section numbers from the bill, because I want you to have confidence that the answers are accurate. I want you to be able to go to the piece of legislation yourself and make sure those answers are accurate. It's hard for me, though, to watch the political ads at this point. I know in the campaign season, political ads are going to do whatever they think they want to do to make a point. And just to give you an example, and even before I get to that, I want to mention that I had to go through a process of understanding what was in the bill. Because labor laws, collective bargaining was not an area that I have spent years studying. I wanted to have sort of a bottom-up understanding of what the policies are currently and how Senate Bill 5 would change them. So I created a chart. What's not going to change as a result of Senate Bill 5 next to what is going to be different as a result of Senate Bill 5. Because all of us have folks in our realm of influence, either family or friends that we care about, who are in public service unions. Teachers, firefighters, police officers. There are other positions with regard to state and local government that are unionized. But Senate Bill 5 affects public employees beyond the collective bargaining and the union contracts. It's very comprehensive. So I wanted to go through this process of understanding what isn't going to be changing and what is. We have received some interesting emails, and one really came in last week that is worth noting. In fact, the email states he's getting pamphlets in the mail, and he's asking questions based on the information on the pamphlets. One question he said is, the pamphlet says that Senate Bill 5 puts our families' safety at risk, making it harder for emergency responders to negotiate for critical safety equipment and training, and that's within quotation marks. That's a false statement. That would have been a piece that was debated in the version that came out of the Senate, but because of that language needed clarified in that particular section of the law, the House version, the final version, as it passed out of the House, changed it to specifically require or allow the bargaining would be able to take place on safety equipment for our emergency responders and really anyone who's using a union contract. So it's not just the emergency responders. Anyone who would have a need for safety equipment is allowed to bargain for safety equipment. So please put that piece of advertisement off the table because it's not factually accurate. The second point he asked about was, and I even saw this on raw footage last night, to the point where I transcribed the commercial. Have you seen the commercial dealing with the nurses? It would say, the advertisement he received said there would be a nursing shortage and illegal for nurses to demand reasonable, safe staffing levels. And this is what the commercial says. When a patient comes through the door, it's my job, and as a nurse speaking, to give them the attention they need so that they can heal. But these days, my job is more difficult because of increased patient loads and not enough nurses. But SB 5 makes it harder for nurses to give their patients the quality care they need. SB 5 makes it illegal for nurses to negotiate for safe staffing levels. The commercial fails to disclose a couple of things. Most of the nursing staff in hospitals around the state are not public sector employees and do not fall under collective bargaining agreements. Secondly, the commercial fails to disclose that without Senate Bill 5, current law in the same section but a different paragraph specifies that the public employer has the right and responsibility to determine the adequacy of the workforce. That would include staffing levels and increased patient loads. All of those are components of what, without Senate Bill 5, the employer would still have the responsibility to make those determinations. Now, can they use that in a collective bargaining process under current law? Certainly, but it does not affect she's in a hospital setting in the commercial, you even see a little baby in a bassinet or an incubator behind her. It makes you create this emotion that if Senate Bill 5 were to move forward, we're not going to be able to get the adequate care we need if we are in the hospital or our children are in the hospital. And I would categorize that as misleading. Another email we received was from a gentleman, and this is the last example I'll give in my opening remarks. It was more of a complaint type email that the passage of Senate Bill 5 was going to cost him thousands of dollars, and it was going to repeal the capacity for him to accumulate paid sick days. That's not the case. That's not what the language of Senate Bill 5 specifies. What happens in Senate Bill 5 is the accumulation of paid sick days for collective bargaining agreements is capped at 1,000 hours when you retire for sellback, for unused days. The accumulation still accumulates year after year after year. In current law, this is what is not changing in Senate Bill 5. There are certain employed positions that are not under collective bargaining agreements where the cap on selling back the accumulation of sick days that are not used is at 240 hours. So this gentleman was upset because the union contracts were going to be capped at 1,000 hours when current law already caps for other public employees who are not under collective bargaining agreements, caps their sellback at 240 hours. And the reason why I believe, I wasn't in the room when the bill was drafted, but I believe the problem that local governments are facing in terms of this particular piece alone are these huge payout checks. The city of Cincinnati earlier this year reported $93 million paid out in retirement bonus checks. Some of the city employees were getting a bonus check of more than $200,000 per person. The private sector doesn't have that. A lot of the non-union public employees don't have that. So what Senate Bill 5 does is place a reasonable cap on the sellback of those hours. These are just a few examples, and as you're trying to sort through the details of the legislation, what I would really encourage you to do is look at our 25 frequently asked questions, because it does give the answers straight from the bill. Ralph, are those on the table if they're not already circulating?
I've already given everybody a copy.
Right. In addition to that, I would strongly encourage you, whether you're for or against the measure, to visit ivoters.com. This week it went live with video interviews from the leaders of both, not just on Issue 2, but Issue 2 and Issue 3. We sought to interview those who would be representative of both sides of the issue. I will tell you that we made dozens, and it may be as many as 20 attempts, to get the anti-Senate Bill 5 or the anti-Issue 2 folks to sit down for an interview. We went down to their Columbus office, we exchanged emails, phone calls. So at this point in time, the interview segments that you will see are from the proponents. There is a spot, and the anti-Issue 2 people can see the questions. They can prepare ahead of time for the questions, because the same question is asked of both parties. If they still would sit down and answer those questions, and they may choose not to, maybe they don't want to answer the questions. But I think that in and of itself is a statement in terms of how they would not want to help to inform the public on those questions that are being asked. But as of today, even if they were to call Roundtable's office today and schedule the interview, as soon as those interviews are complete, we would update the site so that you would be able to see both sides. So if you go tonight or tomorrow and see just the pro-Issue 2 side, check back. And if you're here tonight and you're involved with the Anti-2 campaign, please encourage them to be a part of this process, because a lot of people are visiting this site to get the information on both Issues 2 and 3. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you for having me up here tonight. Rebecca, have you handed out the... Okay, great. I'm going to filibuster briefly while we get those hung out. That's totally my fault for getting here later than I was supposed to. I'm Matt Mayer, president of the Buckeye Institute. We're a fiscally conservative think tank in Columbus, focused on state issues, and have been covering the issue of collective bargaining reform for well over a year and a half before there was a Senate Bill 5. So with the document that you're getting, I'm going to run through that rather quickly so that we can have as much time for questions and answers as possible, because I think that's the most informative part of this. So I'll try to keep my remarks to a minimum, and I'm still filibustering. So go ahead.
Okay, I'll add on to the filibuster here. So, what I can add to this discussion here is I traveled the nation extensively, usually on the road 4 to 5 days a week, covered about 45 states in the last 5 years. And the opportunity I have to add to this discussion is being across the country, seeing real-world examples of what happens in a high-tax, high-regulatory environment, and how people walk away from that, and how business walks away from that. Starting right here at home, I managed the time, the business I was managing was about 15 employees. We were set up in Kansas City, and I also lived in Kansas City. And it came a point where had a larger family, I need to get a bigger house. And so I